Wondering how you can become better at running your business? Entrepreneurship can be stressful. There's too much to do and not enough time. If you're isolated in your daily decisions, have no fear. Success and balance are possible. Welcome to the Small Business Answer Man podcast, where you master the art of running a successful business using practical advice from experts who want to help you succeed. Now, here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Welcome to the Small Business Answer Man podcast, where we help entrepreneurs and business owners find solutions so they don't become overwhelmed and stressed. Are you ready to hear about one of the areas of the 6P business owner formula? These 6 areas are people, productivity, pricing, promotion, process, and profits. Today, we're going to really talk about something that can make a difference in your business. And today I've got William with us, and he's going to share with us what problem he will help solve with our listeners.
Yeah, I think, first of all, thanks for having me, Gary. What I'd love to help your listeners with today is answering this question: how do I stand out in the crowd? You know, if I'm a business owner, it's really crowded right now. There's social media buzz everywhere. How do I stand out of the crowd? If I'm trying to get ahead and I work for a small business owner, how can I catch their eye and get ahead? And this isn't just my sort of platitudes on what I think makes people stand out of the crowd. We did a pretty massive research project that led us to some concrete data-driven answers.
Well, it's going to be exciting to have William Vanderbloemen with us today. He's the CEO and founder and the top executive search of Vanderbloemen Search Group, and author of Be the Unicorn, 12 data-driven habits that separate the best leaders from the rest. And the best part is we've got William at a very busy time, because tomorrow he releases that book, the 12 data-driven habits that separate the best leaders from the rest. So William, I can't thank you enough for joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, sure. I don't ask me what day it is, but beyond that, it's all good. I've just come back from a speaking circuit over in the UK, and the buzz around the book is pretty good. I couldn't have timed it like this. I mean, if you have written a book and you're listening today, you know that the time between you having an idea from a book and a publisher actually getting it out is quite a while. So if the timing happens to be right, I don't know that any author can really take the credit. But this book is coming out, and it's telling people, here's what we see causes the best performers to stand out of the crowd. And it's coming out right when the job market's more crowded than ever. Like, there are 5 generations of workers in the workforce. That's never happened before. And they all speak different languages. And how do you stand out in the middle of all that? You know, the unemployment rate has been doing this roller coaster thing for a while, and interest rates, people aren't sure what's happening. It's all kind of uncertain. Didn't see that coming. Certainly, when we started research on the book in 2020, we had no idea the tsunami that artificial intelligence would create and make people wonder, am I getting replaced by me? How do I stand out of the crowd? And then, you know, as we're headed into holidays, there are a lot of small business owners that probably are hoping for their biggest month this month. What can you do to stand out in the crowd? And we didn't see any of those external things happening when we sat down in 2020 and started doing some research that led to this book.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I'm curious to hear some of that research, because your people were good enough to share with me some excerpts. And what I've seen about the book, I'm really excited about, because leaders need this right now, and individuals need it, workers need it, because things are changing from what they were in the past, and we have to understand that. And with that research you did, that's the thing I like, is it's backed up by that research that's there. So I'm going to start out with, maybe, I don't think it's a basic question, I think it's an important one, but how can someone make themselves indispensable?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think it's easier than you might think and harder than you might think. Now, let me unpack that a little bit. So when we're an executive search firm, and you know, a company or business, a church, a school hires us to go find their next leader, right? So we're working for one employer. We might look at 1,000 people that are interested in the search, right? And then that narrows down to 100 or so, and then dozens, and then you're doing phone interviews and Zoom interviews and all this. When you get down to the very best of the best, the top maybe 6, 7, 8 potential matches, maybe it's 10, then you're going to get a long format face-to-face interview with us. So that's really reserved for kind of the best of the best. Well, during the shutdown of the pandemic, we realized, we've now done 30,000 of those long format interviews, and they're all in pretty similar format. And we've tracked who did what. And we said, could we identify the best of that 30,000? Like, did they take the job? Did they stay at the job? Or they, and so we did that. We were able to identify them. And then we said, do they have anything in common, these really rare unicorn kind of people? And I bet you've met somebody like this. You go to a party and you meet somebody, you're like, what a winner, or in a job interview, or if you've done like a college scholarship interview and there's a student that comes up that's like, that one, like there's just something there, right? It's an it factor. And so we wanted to know, is there any data behind that? And the answer was equally surprising and consistent. So what was surprising? Well, the good news is, to be irreplaceable, to stand out of the crowd, you don't have to have an IQ of 175. That was not a common trait. Okay. They didn't all go to an Ivy League school, so you don't have to do that. They weren't even all like we got really superficial. Okay, were they all like 6 foot tall with great hair and teeth or something? Was it the look, the judge a book by its cover? No, it wasn't that at all. It really wasn't even by pay grade. Like, we had some jobs that were middle management jobs, some jobs that were exec level jobs. The same traits kept showing up. And here's what they were. They were habits. They were behavioral habits that kept showing up. We found 12 of them. And they were, on the one hand, very easy to teach and learn, and on the other hand, very rarely applied by people. I don't know if you've ever made this mistake, but I used to think, if I buy a treadmill, that's going to turn me into a marathoner. No.
Oh yeah.
No,
Most of them turns into a clothes rack.
That's right. I have an author friend who said, William, he's got a pretty popular book on dating. He said, I'm trying to figure out how to write a book that is how to lose 20 pounds and find your soulmate in 30 days. He said that would sell more than anything. We're looking for the easy fix. Here's, on the one hand, the habits that these unicorns showed are incredibly easy to learn. On the other hand, they're very rarely practiced. So can you become indispensable? It's easier than you think. Will you become indispensable? It's more uncommon than you think. And so hopefully with this book, rather than just say, they've got it, we think, it's like, no, here are 12 really tested habits that are uncommon among the regular population that you can do. It's not once you learn how to slam dunk or make a hole in one. It's pretty simple stuff.
Excellent. Well, you've teased it up now, so I've got to ask the question is, okay, we may not be able to get through all 12, but share some of those traits that you found.
Sure. Well, one that I think it probably speaks to me because it's one that I actually have. I'm not good at all 12 of these, but one that I have is a fairly high degree of responsiveness. Like, if someone says, hey, can you get back to me on that? I learned a long time ago, I was a young pastor and we were relocating. We didn't have any idea where we were going to put our new location. It was a big deal. I was 26 or 7 years old or something like that. Board chair drove me around and he's like, I bet we could meet here if we buy that land. I bet that YMCA would take us and let us meet there while we're building. I'm like, that's cool. He said, I know the board chair. And I said, oh, that's good. And he said, here's his phone number. And I said, thanks so much, Todd. And I stuck it in my pocket and he said, what are you doing? I said, well, I mean, we're still, he said, why are you not picking up the phone right now and calling him? And I thought, well, why am I not doing that? And he said, William, you may be wired up different than me, but I've found the first chance I have to take action is usually the best one. And that burned in me. And particularly when I started a new small business in this search firm, and I got a wife and 6 kids to feed, and like and it was the fall of 2008. What was I thinking, right? Well, if you wrote in to our website and said, I'd like to talk to you about hiring you, guess how fast I got back to you then, right? And it just kind of became, so I just, and I, over the years, I won't park as long on other habits, but this is kind of interesting. Over the years, I just kept getting hired by people saying, we couldn't believe how quickly you got back to us. Like, I'm like, it's not like rocket science. I just called you right when I got, no, it doesn't. So I read study after study after study. I don't know if you know this term, inbound marketing, like your small business owners that are listening, they'll fill out a form and we'll contact you today kind of thing. So people pay gobs and gobs of money to have software that runs that. And then someone fills out a form. And so a company called HubSpot that we've used forever, we were frankly one of their early adopters, and they took us under wing and taught us a lot, spent a lot of time with us. They showed us a study that they'd done of a massive study of inbound marketing customers, businesses that use the fill out a form, right? So you fill out a form. Gary just filled out a form on our site. If I get back to you within 60 seconds, I have like an over 99% chance of getting to talk to you again, which in sales is the whole point of the sales call, is to have one more call, right? It's not to close, right? So it's kind of like people trying to introduce people to church. You can't drag them across the door in one day. It takes a long time to, kind of gently lead people. So the study went on to show, if you waited 1 hour to return Gary's form, you have a 60% chance of talking to Gary again in your life. 1 minute to 1 hour, it drops from 99 to 60. If you wait more than 24 hours, you have a less than 1% chance of ever hearing from Gary again. Punchline to the study: what was the average response time for people paying for inbound marketing software? Average amount of time it took them to respond to somebody filling out a form? 42 hours.
42, wow.
Less than 1% chance. And they know it. The data is there, and it's like, I really ought to. It's like I shouldn't hit the snooze button 7 times every morning. Right. If you get back to people quickly, and we ran studies through all kinds of things to back this up, but if you get back to people pretty quickly, you're going to stand out in the crowd. And that just sounds way too easy, but it works every single time.
Yeah, it makes sense, because the sooner somebody responds, they see, number one, that what type of company you are, what type of person you are.
Well, and I think it even gets as simple as, when I'm doing email or filling out forms online, I've got my inbox up in front of me. And if you respond to me right away, it catches radar before I got one of the 7 kids asking me to drive them to a practice or whatever the thing is. It just works. And everyone thinks they're good at it, and very, very few people are. So we surveyed, in addition to the 30,000 interviews we did, we then expanded things once we had these 12 traits identified, and we surveyed 250,000 people. How would you grade yourself in each of these categories? Okay. So responsiveness, like 81% of everyone said that they were above average in responsiveness. Now, I'm not like a applied math major, but I'm pretty sure 81% of everyone is not better than average, right?
Exactly.
And the funny thing is, Gary, we did this in partnership with SurveyMonkey, right? So we learned a ton. We've done SurveyMonkey for years and years and years, but this is a pretty massive undertaking. And so we asked them, like, how do you know if you got a really fast responder? And they're like, all the fast responders will have their survey in within 3 days. You can run your survey longer than that, but the bulk of your stuff's going to come in the first 3 days, very few first day, second and third, then it'll start to taper off. Okay. So what was the average response time for those 250,000 we surveyed? And they got back to us and said, it's about 6 days. They
They're
weren't
responsive.
They weren't even average, and 81% of them thought it's not hard. If you're if you like me and you own a small business and you've got kids coming to you for your career advice, tell them to just get back to people. And we can talk more about what advice we're giving our kids about, how to run a business later. But it's 11 more habits like that you would say, William, that's just dumb. And frankly, if I hadn't done all the research, I wouldn't have written the book, because it sounds pretty pedestrian. Okay, get back to people quickly, right? Be really curious.
Yeah.
Like, you want your customers, you want to be really stand out on a sales call. If you own a small business, ask more questions than you give answers. You show curiosity, and first of all, people love talking about themselves, right? And you show curiosity. Like, Gary, I had a job a lifetime ago where I was around a lot of really influential, successful people on a daily basis. And it took me a while to realize it, but I could never get them to talk about themselves. They were always deflecting back to me. So tell me more about this thing you're working on. Tell me more about, and the curiosity, it just made them stand out in the crowd. So it's like little simple things. So we share in the book, we'll share, all right, curiosity. Here's what we've learned in the data. Here's some stories to go with it. And here's how you can apply that habit in your life. So it's a really simple guidebook. And I think if people will take it seriously and spend 30 or 40 days trying to put these things in practice, they'll notice likability goes up, irreplaceability goes up, maybe even a promotion happens. It's amazing how simple it can be to stand out of the crowd.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting you talking about the curiosity and getting people asking questions about them, and, asking those questions. Interview my son this summer. He did an thing out on a ranch in Montana. And he realized when he was taking trail rides, the more he got people to talk about themselves, the bigger his tip was.
Absolutely. Every single time.
Because why? They felt like, boy, this kid gets me, and things.
Well,
and
it's
he's
the,
20 years old.
I've had this is name dropping type stuff, so forgive me, but in my previous career as a pastor, I pastored some churches that had good leaders. And so I've done several funerals with presidents and senators, and, that whole thing. If you ever heard, forget parties, but if you've ever heard somebody say, oh my gosh, I met that president, senator, wherever, it was like I was the only person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they paid attention to me and asked questions, and I'm gonna vote for them now. I mean, that is just fundamentals 101, right? Be curious, get back to people on time. So, yeah.
So I have to ask this do you think with these skills, are they teachable, or some of them, do you think they're more innate personality traits?
I think some are more innate than others. I mean, maybe I get back to people maniacally because I'm some form of OCD. That could be, just my dysfunction, right?
Sure.
If you're bent toward narcissism, it's going to be hard for you to be curious about others, right? So some of them will be more innate than others. What's really cool, okay, now we're going top secret, Gary, because this is not coming out till tomorrow, right? But a couple of books ago, I said we really shouldn't ever write another book without creating a tool that teams can use to learn even more and to get better. So when we did the book Culture Wins, we released a culture tool, right? So we've got a tool that's coming out tomorrow, Vander Index, right? And it will allow you to measure yourself against thousands of other people who have taken the same measurements. So where am I in I think I'm fast at getting back to people. How does that test out against the average? How does it test out against the top 1%? And what's going to be really cool for small business owners, if you're trying to stand out as a business, is you can have your whole team take it about each other.
Mm-hmm.
So like, if I worked for you, Gary, I would take the assessment, and then I'd have you take the assessment about me. And then I'd go find someone that works for me and have them take the assessment about me. And we'd see, like, where do I have a blind spot? And you can start to map your team and say, our team's really good at these 4 areas, and we need to work on these 3 or 4 more, and we'll stand out of the crowd. So it's going to be a really cool, inexpensive tool for teams to get better and businesses to stand out.
Well, it sounds like that would be one of them pieces that, really allow teams to learn so much about each other.
That's right.
And ultimately, I know your last book, you and I spoke about that, is, the culture index is really about culture is created the more you know about each other. So I have to ask this last question because we're coming up at that time. Always happens when we have great things to talk about. But do you think, with hiring managers, be able to know what to look for when they're interviewing job candidates with some of the information that you share within the book? Because if these become data-driven habits and separate the best leaders, we're always wanting to get the best people. How do you think that could be used?
I think from an interviewing front, 2 things. First of all, before the interview, you need to look in the mirror and ask yourself, what do I need from this person? Right? Like, if I'm hiring a salesperson, they better be off the charts good at responsiveness. Right? And I'm probably testing for that in the interview. I'm probably like texting them 30 minutes before the interview, ask if we can meet somewhere different, which sounds awful, but like, that's probably what I'm doing. Right? If I'm interviewing for a new CFO, well, I want them to be kind, because most CFOs' first word out of their mouth is no. So so I always have to remind myself, the longer I do this, William, what are you interviewing for? Because it's going to be different from role to role and your company to your company, right? Then past that, I'm looking to see if the candidate, if I could pick one trait that I'm examining, it's their self-awareness. Because, like, interviewing reminds me of bad high school dating scenes where, I'd spend way too much time washing my car, making it try to look shiny, and maybe even lift weights right before I went to pick her up, right? And if she were excited about the date, which now we're in the hypothetical, but if she were excited about the date, maybe she's gussied up more than she normally would or whatever. And that's just no fun. At our firm, I tell people, there's a biblical story in the Old Testament. And if your listeners may not know it, but our job is to make sure nobody walks down the aisle with Rachel and then wakes up next to Leah, right? So when I'm interviewing, I'm looking for self-awareness. When I say, tell me about yourself, okay, are they going into a 30-minute thing about themselves? Well, that's going to tell me something. Or are they, like, the very best answer I can imagine would be somebody who's done their homework, they know who they are, they know the job they're looking at, and they know why it might fit together. Oh, Gary, I got to tell you, you asked me to tell me about myself. I'm still learning myself. But one thing I have figured out over the years, if I take the DISC, I'm high on the I. If I take the Enneagram, I'm a 7. I'm extroverted. I love getting around people, facing new challenges every day. That's kind of my deal. Your business is growing like a weed, and that means there are new challenges every day, and everybody's job description says other duties as necessary. Let me tell you how that's similar to where I used to work and how I got my highest marks for adapting and changing and facing new challenges. So I'm excited about you as a person and your mission. But when I look at what's necessary in the job we're talking about and what I've shown that I can do and how it links to who I am, man, that I get excited.
Yeah. Well, some great information. And the neat thing I think about your book, William, is really it's for everyone, because it's for the employer, the business owner, it's for the leader, it's for the person that is going into the workplace. I plan on getting a copy. I've got 2 younger sons. and a daughter that's just finished up college this year. So I want to be able to share that with them. And the book is Be the Unicorn, 12 Data-Driven Habits That Separate the Best Leaders from the Rest. Comes out tomorrow. So make sure you pick up your copy. I'm sure they can pick it up anywhere where they buy their books. William, is that right?
That's right. You can go to theunicornbook.com. You'll actually find some resources there, a link to the Vander Index. You'll find a free first chapter you can read before you decide if you want to buy the book, and then all the different outlets you can buy from.
Okay, great. We'll have all that in show notes because we know our listeners are busy people. But before I let you go.
And the other thing you can do, Gary, is you just spell Vanderbloemen however you want to in Amazon. It'll come up.
There you go. So there's not many of them then, is what you're saying.
No.
Don't worry, we'll have it in show notes so they can just hit the link that's right there. So we know how busy William is. So, but before you go, I do have one last question I ask every guest, and that's, what's your best business advice you would give the business owners?
Yeah, so what immediately pops into my mind is the advice that I've tried to give my children as they become adults. Because we've got one that works for an AI software company. We've got one that's in a cochlear implant doctoral program. We've got one that works at the Ritz-Carlton. I mean, they're in all different businesses. And I've told all of them, they're like, how do you be successful, Dad? I'm like, look, I've worked with a lot of business owners. This is not hard. If you do what you say you're going to do, like deliver quality, when you said you were going to do it, and at the cost you promised, you're going to be in the top 5% of whatever business you go into. And that could be dog catching. It could be, you name a business. And what's funny is, Gary, I've gotten around some people that are older and smarter than me. Like I told John Maxwell that story. He's like, not top 5%, William, top 1%.
Yeah.
If you've ever built a house, you know, could you just do what you said you're going to do it on time, do it on budget? You will never be lacking for work if you follow those three things.
Great advice. I tell you, William, we're so excited that we were able to get you. Remember, check out his book, Be the Unicorn, 12 Data-Driven Habits That Separate the Best Leaders from the Rest. Goes on sale tomorrow. I'm sure it's already up on Amazon. So go grab your copy so you can get one of the first ones sent to you, and then dig in. Don't let this be a book that sits on the side. Just go ahead and start reading it right away, and then check out all the resources that he has available. William, thanks again for joining us today.
Oh, it's great to be with you again, Gary. God bless you and all that you're doing, man.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for joining us today, listeners, because we were excited to get William on with that release being tomorrow and how important that is. So until next time, I want you to think about to go out there each day to grow your business. Remember, the key is, though, don't ascend to the top of the mountain by yourself. Who are you bringing along with you? Maybe you buy a couple extra copies and give it to your leadership team or some of your people on your team. But when you help others achieve success, you find significance in your life, and that makes all the difference in the world. Make it a great day. Come back and join us next week. We'll have another great guest. Thanks for joining us.
That's all the time we have for this week. To continue your journey, head over to smallbusinessanswerman.biz to access the tools and resources mentioned in today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with someone who would benefit from listening. That's smallbusinessanswerman.biz. Until next time, remember, when you find the right solutions, your business grows, and you get your time back.